Yes, I'm wearing it. And by the end of this video, you understand why. When Hollywood shows a Russian, he's almost always dressed the same. Black Adidas tracksuit, three stripes, squatting, drinking beer. It's meme, but behind this meme is a real story, and it's a crazy one. A German company that broke through the Iron Curtain. Soviet special forces fighting a war in sneakers. A tracksuit that became the uniform of an entire generation. By the end of this video, we will know why Adidas, not Nike, not Puma, became the symbol of Russia. It's not marketing, it's history. In one moment in 1980, they changed everything. My name is Alex. I am from Russia. This is a real story of Adidas in Russia. Let's go.
Most people think Adidas and the Soviet Union started working together in 1980 at the end Moscow Olympics. Not true. The real story starts way earlier. There is a Soviet government document from 1979, a memo about cooperation with the Adidas company. And this memo says, by that point, they'd been working with Adidas for 20 years already. Think about that. It's 1959. The Cold War is at its peak. World War II ended just 14 years ago, and Soviet athletes are already wearing West German sneakers. And it wasn't just Adidas. In 1965, the New York Times wrote that the Soviet Union ordered 46 pairs of basketball sneakers from an American company, Converse. Yeah, and that Converse was the Soviet national team.
Here is the funny part. Soviet propaganda said Western stuff was bad. Capitalism, the enemy. Jeans, a symbol of decay. But when it came to Olympic medals, the government looked the other way. They talked against the West, and they bought Western sneakers for their best athletes at the same time. Because medals mean prestige, and prestige beat ideology every time. So here's the first thing you need to know about Adidas in USSR. It was rare. Only a few people could get it. And when something is rare and only the top people have it, it becomes a status symbol. That's where the cult of Adidas begins.
By the late 70s, Adidas was one of the main suppliers for the 1918 Moscow Olympics. And this was a huge deal. Thousands of uniforms, tracksuits for the whole Soviet team, sneakers, bags, jackets. Then everything went sideways. December 1979, Soviet troops enter Afghanistan. The West is shocked. President Jimmy Carter announces a boycott of the Moscow Olympics. 65 countries join, including West Germany, the home of Adidas. You think that's the end? A big German company can't keep working with the USSR when its own country is boycotting. But Adidas did something surprising. The head of Adidas, Horst Dassler, son of the founder, decided to keep the contract. And not just that. Documents that came out later show Dassler became a key middleman between Soviet sports officials and the West. He kept the Soviet Union informed what other countries were thinking, how governments were acting, what to expect. Think about it. The boss of one of the biggest capitalist companies in the world keeping a direct line open with the communist government in the middle of the Cold War. It wasn't about ideology. It was about money. But it made Adidas one of the most visible Western companies that did walk away from the USSR during the boycott.
You know what gets me about this story? We think of 1980 as this black and white world, capitalism versus communism, free world versus the Iron Curtain. And the reality, a German businessman sitting in a Moscow office helping Soviet officers read international politics for a sneaker contract. History is way more about money than about ideas, and way more gray than black and white.
After the Olympics, it gets even more interesting. The USSR bought a license from Adidas to make sneakers. They bought the EQM too, and they started making them in the Soviet factories. 4 cities: Moscow, Kiev, Tbilisi, Yerevan. But there was a problem. Out of all the materials on the Adidas list, the Soviets only had 3. The rest had to be imported. And one more detail: they made just one model, blue. 3 white stripes, a yellowish sole. The Adidas logo removed. Instead on the side, one word: Moskva, Moscow. They are the legendary Moskva sneakers. Technically, Adidas. Legally, a Soviet product. Emotionally, the symbol of an era. People who own them say the quality was really high, right up there with the German originals. But good luck finding them in a store. Some went abroad, some went to outlets, some went to special stores of the Soviet elite. If you had real Adidas in the USSR or Moskva, it meant one of 3 things: you were an athlete, you had connections, or you were incredibly lucky. When something is wanted by everyone and available to almost no one, it becomes a cult. Now here's the strangest twist in this whole story. Remember the USSR was fighting in Afghanistan? The same war that caused the Olympic boycott? Well, standard Soviet army boots were terrible for the Afghan mountains. Too heavy, too loud, terrible for climbing rocks. So commanders of elite units, paratroopers, special forces, why they allowed their men to switch shoes, something light, something that worked in the mountains, sneakers. A lot of special forces guys in Afghanistan wear sneakers, most often the Soviet Moskva, the licensed Adidas, sometimes real Adidas, sometimes Puma, sometimes homemade stuff. But the 3 stripes became the most recognizable shoes of the Soviet elite units in that war. The generals hated it. It looked bad on camera. Soviet soldiers and wear sneakers? That's not the image they wanted. So photos of soldiers in sneakers almost never made it into Soviet newspapers. Most of these pictures only came out after the USSR collapsed, and they show one of the most surreal images of the 20th century. Soviet fighters in the mountains of Afghanistan wearing sneakers that say Moskva, made under a German license in the war that made Germany boycott the Olympics.
When I first read about this, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a myth. Then I saw their photos and I read what Afghan war veterans wrote. It's real. Soviet special forces, the best units of the Soviet army, often fought in sneakers with 3 stripes. If a Hollywood writer made this up, you'd say it's too much better. But it's real.
The Soviet Union collapses, the Iron Curtain falls, and Russia opens up. The first thing that comes in? Stuff. Western goods flood the markets. Turkish fakes, Chinese copies, Polish jeans, American t-shirts. But one brand was king, Adidas. After decades of being almost impossible to get, Adidas means status. And in the 19th, everyone who wanted to look important wore it. But important in the 19th meant something very specific. Not only Olympic champions, not diplomats, gangsters, street businessmen, bodyguards. See, a lot of former athletes became bodyguards in the 19th, and they kept wearing what they always wore, tracksuit, usually Adidas. They stood next to crime bosses in black leather jackets, and together they created a new look. That's how the black Adidas tracksuit became the uniform of the post-Soviet street. This was the gopnik, a street guy. In the 19th and 2000s, gopniks defined the look of every route and neighborhood from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. Adidas tracksuit, flat cap, sunflower seeds, squatting, beer. It wasn't fashion. It was the identity of a whole social class.
Now here's the part where it stops being history for me. Because I grew up inside the story. I was a kid in the 2000s in Irkutsk, Siberia. And back then, means something very specific. Everyone has those legendary button phones. Nokia, Sony Ericsson, and those phones were the main currency of the street. If a group of guys in tracksuits stopped you, there was a ritual, always the same, two questions. С какого района? What district are you from? Кого знаешь? Who do you know? You had to name someone respected from that district, and they would check. How close are you with him? Really? If you knew the right names, you walked away. If you didn't, the conversation continued. Got any money? Now imagine, you are 10 years old, your mom gave you money for bread and milk. So technically, it's not your money, right? So you say no. And then came the trick. They say, попрыгай, jump. And you jump. And the coins in your pocket make a sound. And now you're not just a kid with money. Now you're a liar. And liars get beaten before their money gets taken. Me, I was too young. They didn't touch the little kids much. But my older friends, they fought to keep their phones. Sometimes they lost the fight and the phone. And then the system worked in reverse. You called your older brother. He called his friends. And they went to have a conversation with that district. And one more thing. In my district, there was an apartment block with huge graffiti on it. One word, America. So the gang from the building, everyone called them the Americans. Americans. I'm not joking. The most dangerous guys in my Siberia neighborhood were the Americans. So no, the tracksuit wasn't a question. It was a warning sign. Free trips meant problems are coming. And then, somewhere in the 2000s, the gopniks just disappeared. Not because police defeated them, life simply got better. Jobs, malls, chips, cheap smartphones, internet. The street culture that created gopniks lost its reasons to exist. The tracksuit stayed, the fear behind it faded into a meme. And honestly, a meme is a much better ending of the story.
Fast forward to the 2010s. The gopnik slowly disappeared is a social thing. The 19th generation grew up. Their kids have different problems and different style. But the image stayed. Black Adidas tracksuit, squatting, sunflower seeds. First it became an ironic meme inside Russia. Then it went global. And then something wild happened. A Russian designer named Gosha Ruchinsky took gopnik style and turned it into high fashion. He did collabs with Adidas. He used the look of the post-Soviet street on purpose. He showed his own collections at fashion weeks in Paris and London. And his Adidas collaboration, he took it home to Russian cities like St. Petersburg. Models wearing what street gangsters wore 10 years earlier. And the West loved it. They called it gopnik chic. To them, it looked exotic, tonic, real. The three stripes went from a symbol of post-Soviet crime to a symbol of a cool Russianness. Now people wear Adidas tracksuits in Brooklyn and Berlin. Not for the gym, it's a fashion statement, and not to a look that took 65 years to get there.
So let's answer the question we started with. Why Adidas, not Nike, not Puma, not Reebok? Simple. Adidas got there first. In 1918, Nike was just becoming a big brand. Adidas has already worked with Soviet sports for 20 years. Reebok, a small British company nobody knew. Puma was trying to get into the Eastern market, but Horst Dassler was already sitting in Moscow offices. Adidas entered Soviet minds. At the one moment, the Iron Curtain cracked open, the 1980 Olympics. And when the curtain closed again, Adidas was inside. Factories making Moskva sneakers, athletes and special forces wearing them, black tracksuits in every neighborhood. By the time Nike, Puma and Reebok showed up in the 19th, Adidas had been part of Russian culture for 30 years. They were a generation late. That's why the street tribes, not because they're bad, not because they're cooler, because they were first, at the right moment, on the right body. This isn't a joke about Russia. It's a 65 story of a German company and a country that officially rejected everything Western. A story about how money and sports beat ideology. One brand went through the Iron Curtain, through the Olympics, through Afghanistan, through the collapse of the USSR, through the 19th, and came out of a fashion symbol. Adidas in Russia isn't just sneakers, it's a piece of history. It tells the story of my country better than any textbook. This strange, messy, deeply human story for the last 65 years. Three stripes of black, a simple symbol, with the whole country behind it. If you like stories like this about Russia, the way it's very tall, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. See you in the next.